until it can grow up and it can start competing overseas. Then you can let off the protections, right? And then in that sense, they're fighting fit. If you protect it all the time and you never test it overseas, you will end up like Proton, right? Yeah. Look at Proton. We've had it for a very long time. How much does Proton export? Right? Hardly anything. Because Proton was always protected and they would focus on domestic market. Now, with things like AFTA and all that, and you look at what happened in Thailand. Thailand, the car industry is very strong. It's not a national industry. They make cars for other people, but they can make it cheaper than we can make cars. So because Proton was never encouraged to push itself outside, once the barriers drop, it's going to be in a lot of trouble. Okay? So this is a very clear example of the differences. But this is the mess that we're in. We have to figure out a way forward without getting wiped out. Right? So this is where the issue of global trade comes in and the global trade agreements. So US by coming up, Britain by being the first big industrializer, Germany being a late industrializer in Europe, they became trading powers. Right? They protected their economies, they started to trade overseas, and because the economies of the developing nations, of the third world nations, of the ex-colonial nations, we were growing things like getah, mining, palm oil, so forth, right? What are those kinds of goods? They're basically what you call primary commodities, basic goods, not much value added. If you just korek getah je, getah mentah, nilainya tak berapa banyak lah. If you turn the getah into a tire or a glove or condom, whatever else you make here, nilainya meningkat. Yeah, betul kan? Same with opa. Same with even if you log the tree, right? And you turn into furniture, lagi mahal, lagi untung. And of course, if you have the people who can make the stuff, right, craft it, that means they will earn more than the rubber tapper, right, or the logger. This is where value comes in. This is the secret of economic development. This is where it comes from. And if you want your country to develop economically, you have to protect that source. Now, what are the big first world countries good at? They're good at doing value-added industries, right? They can make tires. They make lots of tires, Goodyear and all that kind of stuff, Michelin. They can make cars. They can make gloves. All kinds of stuff, right? And they want to sell it. They want to sell it to us because they can't make enough by selling it to themselves. So they want to open our markets, and that's where you get into trade, right? And then every country has to make a decision. Do I want to buy something from someone else, or do I want to try and make it myself? Can we get really good at making this thing ourselves, or is it something we just can't do, right? If it's so like high tech or something like that. Do you want Papua New Guinea to try and make its own phones? Maybe it's a long shot. Maybe they're better off buying phones from the US or from Europe or from Korea, right? But what is the appropriate thing to open up for, and what is the appropriate thing to close down? Every country needs to make these decisions. But if you have a trade agreement, the decision isn't your own, right? It's a negotiated decision. You have to negotiate with all the other trading partners. Yeah? And so your own personal situation becomes less important. Your own personal limitations also become less of an issue. If you're negotiating with someone who's very strong, very powerful, who knows the game very well, you're at a bit of a disadvantage if you're new to the game and you can't negotiate very well. This is broadly the problem with the trade agreements, right? You have unequal partners operating. If you had very equal partners, and then you talked about, say, free trade or equal terms of trade, then it's a bit more fair. If you're talking about big industrialized countries that can do primary commodities, secondary manufacturing, high-level R&D, high technology stuff, versus countries that can only do level 1, level 2, primary commodity and some manufacturing, like here, right? the ability of the second country to rise up to all three levels is going to be challenged. Because if you're going to buy these things from somewhere else, you'll probably never ever get good at doing it yourself. Right? If you never learn to cook at home, you'll always go out and buy some food from somebody else. Right? You won't be independent now. You won't develop the skill. Right? I mean, that's a very simple example. So this is the issue of development that you need to understand in order to understand what is at stake in things like the TPPA. Because the TPPA and other trade agreements, they basically negotiate every government's ability to decide how to structure the economy, how to protect their industries, and who can own what in the economy. So the agreements are not just about trade, they're also about investment. And the interesting thing about the TPPA is that it's not really much about trade. Trade is a very small part of it. Investment is a big issue. So if you can't sell stuff to someone, right, how else do you make money? Buy them out. Take a share, right? You buy equity in the companies or industries. And so you earn money from that market, right? And you buy. And this is actually very efficient. It's very efficient compared to the old system of imperialism, colonialism, where you actually have to send people overseas. They don't like the heat, they don't like the sweat, they don't like the disease, the malaria, they don't know the language, the culture, right? You have to occupy the place, you have to commit violence, all this kind of stuff. It's easier just to buy a share, right? Much more efficient way of getting money to come back to your country. Right? So it's about flows of wealth. Right? And it's all a struggle over flows of wealth. Do the flows of wealth stay in your country, or do they flow out? If your country wants to get richer, obviously you want to have more coming in than going out, right? Makes sense. And sometimes you look at it in terms of what is called the balance of trade. If you're trading more than you're buying, importing, then you will get a surplus, right? And then you will probably profit. If you are buying more than you're trading, then you have a deficit. You've got to make up for it somehow, right? And you've got to make up for it by generating wealth in some other way. Malaysia is a surplus nation, trade surplus. We trade more than we import. But the trade has been slowing down over the last 10 or so years, 15 years, right? Not as dynamic as it used to be. And now the majority of our economy is in services, 55%. Okay? And the government wants to make it bigger. They want to get to 60%. What is service? What's the service job industry?
Tourism.
Huh? Tourism. Okay. Healthcare. What else? Food and beverage, hotels, right? Finance, banking as well, a little bit. Okay. But the biggest part of services here are basically retail, food and beverage, accommodation, right? Can you export these things?
Small market.
I've got really good cooking skills. How do I export my cooking skills?
Open up a chain store.
Okay. I can make soap.
Yeah.
Can I export soap easily?
Really.
Why not?
Because
Orang
small
lain,
market lah.
orang lain yang dah ada bigger company boleh buat more
Yeah,
soap.
but say I have a big company, I set up a big company, I start, I just like knock out the soap like this, and then I put it on the ship. I don't need to personally go and make the soap in another country, right? But if you want to sell cooking skills, if I want to sell my cooking skills to Americans, I literally have to go to America, right, and cook for them. Or they have to come here lah as a tourist, then I cook for them, right? It's very hard to trade service because service is down to the individual, right? If you want to trade manufactured goods, you want to trade getah, balak ke apa-apa, easy, right? You put it on the ship, gone, right? Sold. That's where the money really comes from. But the government thinks that they can really trade a lot of services. Some services you can trade in the sense of, like, say, call center, right? Okay, I sell, we're based here, but we're answering for, HSBC in London or something like that, right? But even then in the call center, you're limited by how much a human being can service, right? How many calls can you manage at one time?
Yeah.
One call at a time, pretty much, right? Unless you're like texting and then like doing the phone. You're still limited in how much you can trade. Whereas if you're trying to trade a manufactured good, you just build more machines, right? Or you build a better machine that makes more stuff, and then the output can shoot up exponentially. Whereas the services is a bit more flat. So what's happened in Malaysia is that we didn't get a very strong manufacturing sector. The big push in the 80s with stock market policies didn't really work. We tried to go for big steel, for Wajah, all that, gagal, right? We tried for Proton, national car, also gagal, right? Even after that, I think we kind of gave up. We were very good at making manufactured goods from rubber,
Yeah.
right? Gloves, condoms, all kind of things. Very good, very successful, but it's only one something. Not enough. Not enough to build the whole country up. You look at Korea, they built steel, they built cars, they built handphones. This is an iPhone.
Electronic.
Yeah, electronics, right?
Yeah.
They make TV shows. Boom. You
K-pop.
can send them out, right? They got a film industry, right? They're exporting culture as well as, which is basically form to service. They're exporting service as well as manufacturing goods, right? So they got a pretty, the economy is running on full steam. All the bits are going. Whereas here, why is it also working there? Education is good, right? So even if they open up for free trade, they got a lot of strengths already. Whereas here in Malaysia, I would say we've got a lot more weaknesses. Education sector is not quite so strong. Manufacturing sector is quite weak, it's only about 25-29%.